Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning.
Thanks again for this generous gift of your time. I just wanted to go back to our first interview to just explain what we've gone through, because we spoke about your ancestry, your family roots, some of your childhood, some of your youth experiences going to university, your Vietnam experience, and also that you were aware of a certain spiritual, what do we call that? A prescience, a spiritual destiny as well, since you were a child.
Mm-hmm.
And that you followed that route. And after your accident about 30 years ago, your closed brain trauma, you have progressively moved towards this awareness you had as a child that there was a certain spiritual destiny that moved you from being Norman Tipner to being Daniel Raphael. And that in the last 10 years, you've written about 50 books.
Yes.
You've been a clairaudient channel for spiritual teachings, and you focused on issues like the 7 minimum values for social sustainability, the necessity of family learning centers for sustainable nations, and the co-creative team process for collective decision-making. And all of this is in the context of an imminent civilizational collapse that you've been aware of since you were young, and that the spiritual teachers have confirmed. So I just wanted to ask if this is a kind of accurate summary of some of what we went through last time, and if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, I've been on clairaudient channel for probably about 25 years.
Sure, that's a long time. So what I wanted to get to today was the work you've been doing on democracy. And you've spoken broadly how you've explained how humanity has moved from stage 1 democracy to stage 2 democracy, and to where we need to go now, which is stage 3 democracy. And could you speak about that?
Yes. Gosh, back in the mid-70s, early 70s, I found a sheaf of notes that I made while I was in Vietnam. As an officer, I had some discretion on my time, as I was stationed at Long Binh Post, and I worked at the 332nd Medical Dispensary as the administrative officer. And I had afternoons where I went back to my hooch, as we call it, and sat outside in a lawn chair that some other officer had left. And I read a couple books that I had brought with me, Heidegger and Buber, and Martin Buber and Heidegger, and also the Army Times magazine, which came out once a week. And I read the articles in there about the riots back in the United States, the peace marches, and it was mixed with racial marches and so on. And, the Kent State killings had occurred. And so I was, or going to occur, I was aghast at that. And I thought, this is not right. This is not working. There must be a means by which people can peacefully share their opinions, preferences, and so on, without having to go in death marches, so to speak, where they were confronted by armed police and National Guard and so on. And I thought that the Constitution should provide such a peaceful process. But reading the Constitution, I realized that it did not. That people can write to their representatives and their senators and the president and so on. But that was pretty ineffectual, and still is. So I thought about this, and I made those notes. And then in early part of the 70s, we were moving from one house to another location, and I found those notes. And I read the first couple of pages, and I thought, well, what are you going to do with this? Isn't this legitimate still? And I'm a I am a inveterate question asker. I'm so curious. And so ask a question, you need to get an answer. So I set those aside, and then I had some time a couple of years later, I began researching democracy. And democracy has its early roots in England in the 900s CE. And the barons were very disgruntled with King John. And they said, basically, John, we need an agreement where you listen to us, where we can have our say. And so 125 years later, King John signed the Magna Carta. Was it 1215? Something like that. And ever since then, that even that primitive form of democracy has been evolving. And so through the centuries, the processes of democracy have become more and more direct, meaning that citizens have a more direct means of input to their government and to the processes and the bills of legislation that affect them. So many people left England, and they were still unhappy about the reign, the control of the king while they were in the colonies. And so one of the acts of rebellion was the Boston Tea Party. Now, you say, well, Daniel, that didn't have much to do with democracy, did it? But it was a protest for being taxed on the tea, and they had no representation to say yes or no about whether they wanted that tax on the tea or not. And so in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written by the founders of the American Revolution, and it declared that the states, the colonies, were independent of the reign and power of the king. That ended up to be quite a violent revolution, and eventually the authority of the king was beaten back to England, to his homeland. That period before the revolution was stage one of democracy. It is the nascent, pregnant, vocal, violent actions of individuals and groups of individuals who wanted to have independence and to elect their own king, so to speak. So their own president, eventually. Now that is stage one. The revolution was the entry point for the beginning of stage two. Stage two officially began with the completion of the Articles, not the Articles of Confederation, but the second Constitution in 1791. And it was eventually ratified by all the colonies, all the individuals there. That was the beginning of stage two. And in stage two, all of those rules, articles of the Constitution were embedded as a permanent document, which did allow for amendments to be made. And accordingly, approximately over 20, 25, 26 amendments have been made to the Constitution. The most important are the what originated as the Bill of Rights, personal rights, political rights, the first 10 amendments. And those are are primary. The right to meet with others, the right to protest, the right of group meetings, of being able to publish opposition to the regime, which is the democratic government, and so on. Freedom of religion, right to bear arms, and so on. And that was written for the times. At that time, there was no telegraph, no internet, no telephones. The only way you could communicate with your elected official was by letter, and which at that point would take probably 6 weeks to receive a response. And so it was very slow. And the difficulty with that process is that the Constitution locks in the status and operation of government for those times. By 1965, that era, everyone who was over age 18 could vote. You didn't have to own any property, as was the case in the beginning. Women can now vote. People of racial origin, regardless, can vote, and so on. But it still is the same process. The degree of participation of the individual in the operation and governance of the nation, other states and county and city, township, is the same as it was, what, 240 years ago, some odd? And so what has happened is that the Constitution, the founders made no mistakes. They did as good as they could with the times, which means that they didn't account for social change. Social change, yeah. Now, in a democracy, social change operates at its own speed. Now, social change, see, this is where the beginning of the 7 values I've written about come into play, and human motivation. Now, and this is combined with human motivation with, I wrote a paper called The Completion of Maslow's Theory of Human Motivation. Maslow did a wonderful job. His book, which is 1 year shy of my age, was published in, I think, 1944 or earlier. Anyhow, he said that as we satisfy our needs, new needs arise. There's no argument with that. So in my studies, my thinking, I have come to the realization that the need for life, which is one value, is our need to protect ourselves, to preserve our life, is genetic. When we see a threat, whether it's in the Serengeti Valley or elsewhere on the battlefield, you want to protect yourself. So what is the motivation? Where does it come from? What triggers the mind to do that? And so I apologize for saying "and so" so often. And so I guess JT is going to cut that out. Thanks, JT. That we have the basic human core signals or instructions in the human genome include life, equality, growth, and quality of life. And quality of life is really the combination of the preceding 3, 1 through 3, to improve a condition of our life. And the three values that identify humans are empathy, compassion, and a generalized love of humanity, which is the combination of the first of empathy and compassion that we would apply to all of humanity as we would to ourselves. What happens is that these values, these instructions of motivation originate from the human genome, are in everyone. Okay? So what people do is the needs come into existence when they interpret those values. For quality of life, people want to have a bigger house, even though the house they live in satisfies them. So the originating core instructions for wanting a bigger house is one, quality of life, equality, quality of life, equality, and in the interpretation would be their self-image, their ego needs. And so when these are satisfied, the values are still there, and they urge us to improve, to want more. And when you combine this with tens of thousands of people, tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people who have changing interpretations of their basic needs, you come away with social change of tremendous power. And when you apply that need for greater freedom, greater autonomy, and expand that into the right of self-determination, which comes in the form of freedom and liberty, you end up with revolutions. If we take the current situation in the United States, the world, Europe, the world, whether it is in Chad and the Sudan in Africa, or whether it's in Manhattan, New York, United States, people want freedom. People want to determine what they bring into their lives. And when they can't do that, they rebel. They end up with riots, rebellion, and if things don't go better, then it ends up with a revolution. Revolution in a democracy ends in democracy. That's it. That's my opinion about that. So human motivation is the cause of social change. It is the cause of political change. It is the cause of economic revolutions that occurred in France in 1789. The revolution in America was political. It had to do with the exercise, the demand for the basic rights of being a citizen in a nation. They wanted to participate. And the basic value there is equality. People wanted to have the quantitative equality of the king. The quantitative means that they have the rights to affect legislation, affect the political circumstances in their lives at all levels, from the local to the national and international even. And what this also comes down to is they wanted the qualitative equality of the king. Now, the qualitative equality of the king meant that for the king, he had total control of the political process. I know some political writers have said the king had compromises he had to make. Well, that's up to him. But he had the right to choose whether he wanted to or not. People today do not. People do not have the right of more direct participation. Your direct participation in the governance of your life and your neighbors and the rest of the nation is once every 2 years when you vote. Well, you and I know that's just BS. We want to have more say in how we are governed. We have the internet. Here's an example. Today, right now, this moment, I'm on a Zoom call from Evergreen, Colorado, United States, to Marthe Muller in South Africa. It's instantaneous, maybe a half-second delay. Yet you are obligated by limitation to confer with your legislative public executives, meaning the representatives and senators, and president and county commissioners, et cetera, every 2 years. You just can't pick up your cell phone and call the president and say, I got an opinion about that. I'd like you to vote so-and-so. I want you to approve this, the passage of this bill that's been approved by the House of Representatives and the Senate. And so that it works better for me out here in the hinterlands. You can't do that. Yeah, you get the switchboard, but you won't have any personal say. So we are stuck in the second stage of democracy. It began with the final passage and approval of the Constitution in 1791 to the present time, which is this is June 2023. Now, what I want to hold out to you is stage 3. Okay. Now, given the democratic principle that the public, citizens, are ultimately the originating authority for the operation of a democratic government and the formation of this government and its operation. Well, if your representatives and your senators don't know what your preferences are, your opinions are, your choices would be, then they really don't know what you want. And that goes for 230 million people. Do you realize that in the beginning of the Constitution and the governance of our first era of the governance of our democratic government using the Constitution, that you as a citizen back in 1800 would be one of approximately 3,000 individuals who would be represented by your elected representative. The ratio was 1 representative to 3,000 citizens. Eventually, in 1911, oh gosh, I forgot the name of that. So, it's in my book. Anyhow, it's a redistribution of the votes of the voters to the representatives. By 1911, there were 435 individuals who were representatives in the House of Representatives in the federal Congress. And now there's the same number, but you are one of 700, approximately, I think, I have got the numbers in the book. There's
stage 3
book.
democracies. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
And this here pretty much says it all about a democracy. Anyhow,
do you want to read that for us? Do you want to read that for us? Because I can't see it from here.
Okay. Yeah. I understand that. Thank you. Yes. you would have to be very farsighted to view something 9,000 miles away. Okay. This says, oops, there's the backside. No dictator, no autocrat, and no totalitarian government can erase the original causes that bring democracy into existence. They are innate to our species. People need to have the right and to exercise their right of self-determination through the form of freedom, which is total freedom. And the limitation of freedom is called liberty. And liberty is governed by laws. If you're angry at your neighbor, you do not have the right to go over and kill him or her or strangle their children. There's a law against that. So we accept in a democracy that liberty is a necessary limitation for the exercise and operation of a democratic government, and are part of our representation. Excuse me. I need some more coffee.
Daniel, may I interrupt there for a second? Because
Sure.
you've taken us through stage 1 and 2 democracies, according to your definition, starting in 1215 with the Magna Carta. So we're talking about Western democracy. And it's very clear from the 3 emotional values of love, empathy, and compassion that that is not how political systems have been implemented, that women and people who are considered minorities in America, and obviously not minorities if you look at the whole of Africa, but people have not benefited from this Western democratic style of moving away from monarchical rule. So before we go back into what it looks like, what stage 3 democracy will look like, you have mentioned that women and maybe female ways of being, the Brahma Kumaris talks about people with caring responsibilities, that it looks like there's some people in our society who are better suited to implement what is needed in stage 3 democracy so that every one of the almost 8 billion people on Earth have access to a quality of life that is bearable. So I wanted you to now talk about that stage 3 democracy that you are urging us to move towards, noting that women might be better suited. So yes, I'll leave it there.
I will not term this in sexist or racial qualifications. Okay, I want to say that at the outset.
Yeah.
I know what your agenda is, and I have the same agenda, but mine is for everyone.
Yeah.
Women particularly, and individuals. Okay, let's begin again. Okay, and hold up your hand or something, and I'll give you a time to speak. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Ask a question. In these contemporary times of the world, we have a number of mature stage 2 democracies, and those that are semi-corrupt and corrupt and are easily influenced by the financial oligarchy in the United States and other Western nations. This is what I call a feral democracy. We live in feral democracies where individual citizens do not have equal representation in their congresses and parliaments and so on. And we know the outcomes of that very clearly. Now let's go abroad in our thinking to the rest of the world. There are nations that are stage 2 and stage 1, and the nations that are struggling to become operational stage 2 democracies are having the most difficulty. And it's not that democracy as a political strategic plan for a nation is inept or incapable of addressing those needs, but that the other needs of people are not being fulfilled. The conditions for organizing a new stage 2 democracy are not available. If you consider that the founders of the United States democracy were educated men who were financially capable and who had a tremendous sympathetic audience, is what assisted them to form the government that came about. If you consider Venezuela as a late stage 1 democracy, it is not operational democracy. They do have sham voting, as occurs also in Russia, and the markings of democracy, but not the true operation of democracy. Weapons, guns, mortars, grenades, drones, and so on, are a means of subverting the efforts of individuals to form a democracy. And so there are dozens upon dozens of nations that are in different levels of stages of disintegration. And there's really not much to be done about that. The United States has meddled and interfered in many nations in the name of democracy, and that is also BS. There's always been an economic motivation behind that, and that motivation goes way back to the colonies in Africa and Indonesia and China and so on, in the United States and South America. This is not a healthy way to begin. Now there's no turning back, and so the only way that we could move ahead now is through social evolution that will demand political evolution. The needs of people do not go away. The needs of people to make choices that control their lives will not go away, no matter how much that Negroes have been denied the vote for centuries, for decades, will never go away. Their need for democratic participation will not go away, and neither will it for impoverished people in any nation. The rights of self-determination are run through all people at all times, and when the needs of people are not met, they will eventually revolt, and they will in fact destroy the system that allows them to be in revolt. We are in a particularly crucial time now in the world where artificial intelligence is just beginning to peek itself from under the covers of technology to become recognized as a potential power of decision-making. At the same time, unfortunately, I have not seen any efforts to tie the internet and remote voting to the processes of democracy in a rational means to influence legislation. We have big business, which is the economic factor that sways the direction of Congress and legislative bills. And we have big government, which then unfortunately is now the handmaiden of commerce and business. But there's no big public. And so there is a need for people to have greater and more direct and more frequent representation. And I anticipate that some altruistic individual will come forward and develop and initiate an internet-based remote voting process that has the same validity, protections, and security as the use of your credit card. Okay. Billions of transactions are conducted every day through the use of credit cards over the internet. Why not use it for voting? But we would not call this voting to make final decisions, but we would call it the development of public sentiment, so that we would be able to discern accurately, statistically, the preferences of the public and share that in publications on the internet with politicians, all public executives, the media, and with citizens who participate. It'd be an open process. Of course, there will be many objections to that. Those in power do not want to lose power. But when people vote in harmony and in union, the same causes and same motivation, in a similar manner as the patriots did during the American Revolution, willing to give their lives to form a rational government, democratic government and democratic process, they'll do it again. I know they will. And as far as AI is concerned, if AI is truly as smart and insightful, and growing more so with time and improvements, don't you think that AI will also give opinions based on the basic needs of humans? Absolutely. It's all out there. It's all out there. And AI is now harvesting, they call it gleaning or scraping, the internet for data. And when books are put into digital form and put on the internet, AI can become aware of that. Now, I believe that AI will eventually discover the 7 fundamental core values, motivations of humans. And those don't go away. If you consider that we today are Homo sapiens, we are the descendants of originating Homo sapiens 200,000 years ago. Now, because we know, and this is the truth, that values or motivations always underlie decision-making. I don't care whether it's in the grocery store, whether it's on a car lot buying cars, or whether it is a bicycle for your kids. You have values that you use to judge and discern which one to buy, who to elect, and so on. Now, if AI is as smart as people say it is and going to be, even smarter, it will discover those values. And it will use those values in its decision-making. Out of these 7 values, they underlie our choice-making. Well, when you tell your child not to ride the bicycle, their new bicycle, out on the street, you're making choices. Ethical choices. You want to preserve the life of that child. Further, you do not want to be held liable for letting your child ride in the street and getting killed. So you are also considering your equality of being free. What I've done is develop a I'm going to pause here and go get my book, okay? So
Certainly.
we'll edit this out.
Yes.
Okay.